Welcome back to our channel. In today's lesson, we're diving into one of the most misunderstood story structures in creative writing, Freytag's pyramid. And chances are, you've been using it completely wrong. Most writers think they understand Freytag's pyramid, but here's the thing, they're making critical mistakes that are actually hurting their story planning. The biggest misconception? That the climax is just the most exciting part. Spoiler alert, it's not. There's also confusion about how many parts there really are. Hint, it's not 5, and where the real turning points actually happen. Today, we're going to break down what Freytag's pyramid actually is, where it came from, and most importantly, how to use it correctly to make your stories absolutely incredible. So, what exactly is Freytag's pyramid? It's a dramatic structure created by German playwright Gustav Freytag in 1863 in his book, The Technique of Drama. But here's where most people get it wrong from the start. Freytag wasn't writing about modern novels or short stories. He was analyzing German and Shakespearean tragedies. The structure gets its name because when you draw it out, it literally looks like a pyramid. The action rises from the introduction, peaks at the climax, and then falls toward the catastrophe. This shape shows how the first half of the story, the build-up, and the second half, the resolution, meet at a single, powerful moment, the climax, where everything changes for the protagonist. But here's the key thing everyone misses. Freytag identified 5 main parts, and in between these are 3 important turning points, or moments, so a total of 8 components, not just 5 elements. The original structure was designed specifically for 5-act plays, where the drama builds to a single decisive moment and then shows the inevitable consequences. Think Hamlet, Macbeth, or Romeo and Juliet. These are tragedies where the hero's fate is sealed and we watch it unfold. Now let's break down the structure according to Freytag, which has a total of 8 components. Part 1. Introduction. The introduction sets the stage by establishing the world of the story, including the time, place, main characters, and their everyday lives. It gives the audience a sense of the normalcy that will soon be disrupted. This section should be short but rich, leading directly into the first disruption. For example, in Romeo and Juliet, this is where we meet the feuding families and learn about the hatred between the Montagues and Capulets. Part 2. The exciting moment. This is the moment that sparks the central conflict and launches the plot into motion. It often involves a choice, event, or discovery that forces the protagonist out of their routine. From here, the stakes begin to rise, and the story shifts into action. For example, in Romeo and Juliet, 2 parallel scenes mark the igniting point. Romeo's decision to attend the ball sparks the chain of events that lead to him meeting Juliet, while Paris's courtship of Juliet puts pressure on her from another angle. Both threads begin moving toward the central conflict. Part 3. The rising action. This is the longest part of the story. In this section, tension increases through a series of events and complications that deepen the conflict. Characters are tested, alliances form or break, and the protagonist faces growing obstacles. Each scene builds momentum toward the story's major turning point. For example, in Romeo and Juliet, the rising action is broken into 4 stages. The first stage is the masked ball, where Romeo and Juliet meet. The second stage is the garden or balcony scene, where they agree to marry. The third stage is the secret marriage ceremony. And the fourth stage is Tybalt's death, the violent break that changes everything. Each moment intensifies the stakes emotionally and socially. Part 4. The climax. The climax is the story's most intense and emotionally charged turning point and the narrative's midpoint. It's often when the protagonist takes decisive action or faces a life-changing realization. This moment alters the direction of the story and reveals the true cost or consequence of the central conflict. For example, in Romeo and Juliet, Romeo's revenge, though emotionally understandable, breaks the prince's decree and triggers the legal and social fallout. The young lover's private world is now in direct conflict with public order. Part 5. The tragic moment. The tragic moment usually follows the climax and marks a significant loss, betrayal, or emotional blow to the protagonist. It often symbolizes the price of the choices made and deepens the emotional weight of the story. This scene sets the tone for the beginning of the downfall. For example, Romeo's exile marks the beginning of the downward spiral. What should have been a joyful union is now a source of pain and despair. Juliet's future is jeopardized, and the lovers' separation is enforced by fate and law. Part 6. The falling action. This phase deals with the consequences of the climax and shows the unraveling of events. The protagonist may try to regain control, but the situation often worsens. The power dynamics shift, and the audience senses the story heading toward a resolution, often dark or irreversible. For example, in Romeo and Juliet, this includes Juliet's forced marriage to Paris, the sleeping potion plan, and the series of miscommunications and failed messages that seal the lover's fate. Part 7. The moment of final tension. This brief scene just before the end is a final complication or twist that offers a brief moment of hope or suspense. It may feel like the outcome could still change, even if only for a second. This pause heightens the emotional impact of the ending and keeps the audience fully engaged. For example, in Romeo and Juliet, Romeo encounters Paris at Juliet's tomb. This scene raises a fleeting hope. Perhaps Romeo might learn the truth. But instead, he kills Paris, deepening the tragedy and eliminating another possible resolution. The audience senses finality approaching, but sees a glimmer of what could have been avoided. Part 8. The Catastrophe. The catastrophe is the final resolution, where the main conflict reaches its inevitable, often tragic end. It brings closure to the characters' journeys, even if through death, defeat, or irreversible change. This ending is meant to feel complete and meaningful, showing the full consequences of the plot, and provides a reflection on what has been lost or learned. For example, Romeo and Juliet both die. Romeo drinks poison, Juliet awakens, finds him dead, and stabs herself. Their deaths fulfill the tragic arc and resolve the long-standing feud through immense personal cost. The prince, Montagues, and Capulets reflect, and reconciliation comes too late. Most writers completely ignore the three transitional moments, but they're what make the structure actually work. So, in total, 8 important parts can shape a powerful story. The most essential one is the exciting moment because it gets the main action started. Now, let's talk about where modern writers go wrong. The biggest mistake? Thinking the climax is just the most exciting part. In Freytag's original structure, the climax isn't about explosions or sword fights. It's about the moment when the hero's inner conflict reaches its peak, normally at the midpoint of the story. It's psychological, not just physical. In other words, the climax is the turning point where the character makes a crucial decision or change, one that will shape everything that happens next. Another huge mistake is trying to force every story into Freytag's pyramid. The truth is, Freytag's structure was designed for classical tragedies and serious dramas, especially those where the protagonist faces downfall, failure, or harsh consequences. It works best when the story ends on a tragic or somber note. That means it's not always a perfect fit for modern adventure stories, comedies, or stories with happy endings, which often follow different patterns like the hero's journey or 3-act structure. Writers also mess up the pacing. They often rush through the rising action to get to the exciting parts, like the climax or big battle. But Freitag emphasized that the rising action should take up a large portion of the story. This is where readers get to know the characters, feel the tension build, and become emotionally invested. Without that slow build-up, the climax won't feel earned or meaningful. And here's one more common mistake: ignoring the falling action. Many modern writers treat the climax as the end of the story, but according to Freitag's structure, what comes after the climax matters just as much. The falling action and catastrophe show the consequences of the main character's choices and wrap up the emotional and narrative threads. Without this final section, the story can feel incomplete or rushed. Now, let's walk through each part of Freitag's pyramid with examples from the Hunger Games to show how it works. Part 1. Introduction. In the Hunger Games, we're introduced to District 12's bleak setting, Katniss's daily survival, her bond with Prim and Gale, and the oppressive control of the capital. The tone is grim, and the stakes are clear. Life is hard, and the reaping looms as a deadly tradition. Part 2. The exciting moment in the Hunger Games, it's when Prim's name is drawn and Katniss volunteers. This emotional, shocking moment launches the main conflict. Katniss's impulsive act of love pulls her from her survivalist routine into the deadly arena of political spectacle, setting the story in motion. Part 3. The build-up. In the Hunger Games, Katniss travels to the capital, trains, is interviewed, and enters the arena. Tension escalates as she navigates new dangers: public image, politics, and unpredictable competitors. Her relationship with Peeta deepens, but so does her fear, especially when the games begin and survival becomes brutal and immediate. Part 4. The Climax. In the Hunger Games, many people think it's the final berry scene with Peeta and Katniss, but it actually happens earlier in the story, when Katniss allies with Rue and destroys the career's food supply. This is the turning point, where Katniss stops merely surviving and begins actively undermining the capital's system. Destroying the food flips the balance of power in the arena and signals Katniss's growth from a reluctant tribute to a defiant strategist taking control of her fate. Part 5. The Tragic Moment. In the Hunger Games, Rue is killed shortly after their plan succeeds. Rue's death devastates Katniss and deepens her anger toward the capital. Her mourning and symbolic tribute ignite rebellion in the districts and mark a shift from personal survival to public resistance. Part 6. The Falling Action. In the Hunger Games, the rule change allows 2 victors, and Katniss finds and protects Peeta. Katniss's motives become increasingly complex, part strategy, part emotion, as she tries to keep them both alive. But she now understands the capital is manipulating everything, and that survival is more than just staying alive. It's navigating power. Part 7. The Moment of Final Tension. In the Hunger Games, the capital revokes the 2-winner rule, forcing Katniss and Peeta to consider suicide with nightlock berries. This final high-stakes moment pits the capital's authority against the tribute's autonomy. Katniss's clever, rebellious choice forces the capital to concede and crowns them both victors, temporarily. Part 8. The Catastrophe. In the Hunger Games, Katniss returns home, but realizes she's become a symbol of rebellion and a target. Though she wins the games, her act of defiance with the berries has put her in political danger. The capital's grip may be shaken, but the consequences for Katniss and the future of Panem are just beginning. So, when should you actually use this structure? Freytag himself said it works best for dramas and tragedies, stories where characters face serious internal conflicts and the stakes are genuinely high. It's perfect for coming-of-age stories with real consequences, psychological dramas, stories where the protagonist's flaws lead to problems, historical fiction dealing with serious themes, and any story where character growth involves genuine loss or sacrifice. But here's the thing. It might not work for light romantic comedies, action-adventure stories focused on external conflict, stories where the protagonist succeeds without major internal change, or episodic stories without a clear character arc. Remember, there are tons of other story structures out there. The hero's journey, 3-act structure, Save the Cat, they all serve different purposes. Don't force every story into Freytag's pyramid just because it's famous. Remember, Freytag's pyramid isn't about creating the most exciting plot possible. It's about exploring how internal conflicts create external consequences and how characters fail based on their choices. The real power of this structure lies in its focus on character psychology and the inevitable results of our actions. What's your experience with Freytag's pyramid structure? Have you been using it, or do you prefer other methods? Drop a comment below. That's all from us today. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more lessons and ideas. See you next time.